Alrighty, so today we're going to talk about the free group stage game that the U.S. men's national team is going to play in the World Cup. And in the first one, they are going to be playing against Wales, which will happen on November 21st, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. In fact, I don't know why I actually put the kickoff time for these games, because all these games is going to be starting at the same time at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Now, unfortunately, all these games that is taking place, I have to work when all these games is going to take place. So basically, I'm going to have to watch these games later, but I'll definitely keep track of it on my phone, and that maybe I'll be sneakily check the score every now and then in terms of what happened in these ones. But obviously, the first one between the U.S. versus Wales, we already have a lot of people talk about how this is pretty much a must-win game for the U.S. I mean, anytime when you're in a group stage kind of thing, I mean, it might sound like a cliche, but the first game can tell a huge story about where you could go in the groups, because if you lose your first game, there is definitely a high possibility that you're not only behind the eight ball, but you're basically needs to win the next two if you want to advance. Whereas if you draw the first one, it still puts you kind of behind the eight ball a little bit, but at least the next game is kind of the one where you set up that you have to win. Or if you, of course, win your first game, then it definitely sets you up success in terms of at least be able to advance in the next round. I remember back in 2014, in the first game when they played against Ghana, and that the U.S., it was huge for them to get all 3 points in that game, because that was the group that the U.S. was in, that known as the group of death, where they were also with Portugal and Germany, and it was just so important for them to get 3 points against Ghana, a team that even though it's not easy to beat Ghana, and especially it's kind of a revenge game for the U.S. after what happened in the 2010 World Cup, they got exactly that, and they're definitely going to do the same case against Wales. Now, Wales, of course, this is only the second time that they are in the World Cup. The last time that they were in was all the way back in 1958, and they actually qualified for the World Cup after winning against Ukraine in the UEFA playoff round. Obviously, that was a very emotional game in many sense of what's going on around the world. I mean, pretty much everybody was rooting for Ukraine to be able to win that, but in the end, Wales were able to beat them and move on into the World Cup for the first time in almost 50 plus years. Now, when you look at the last 5 games for Wales, it has not been great. I mean, they really actually have not won a single game ever since they beat Ukraine in the UEFA playoff round to get to the World Cup. They lost 1-0 to Poland in the last game. Then they lost 2-1 to Belgium, lose 3-2 to the Netherlands, drew 1-1 against Belgium at home, and then lost 2-1 to the Netherlands at home. Now, some of the opponents that they face are really tough opponents, and are teams that are definitely going to be a considered favorite, at least coming out of the European region, where these are the kind of teams that could have a shot of winning the World Cup. But that being said, that's not the best for coming into the World Cup, and that it's going to be interesting to see how Wales is going to be perform against the U.S. Again, like I said, I know this might sound a cliche, but the first game it's pretty much all so important for both of these teams, and it's also going to be interesting that we talk about the starting 11 and how it's going to look. Well, we'll see what kind of game that the U.S. is going to be involved, because I feel like most likely that this is going to be a game where Wales might like to sit back a little bit, because we know that this is a team that at times likes to just sit back and try to hit on the counter, and the U.S. will see whether, if this is a team that at times I've seen them when they dominate possession, and that they kind of struggle to break down a low block, which that of course is going to be something I'll repeat saying in later this video. It's going to be interesting to see whether if they can do so. And again, it's also important that, I know this might be another cliche, but the U.S. needs to get an early goal. They can get that early goal, which is something that it's been a struggle for the U.S., especially during the World Cup qualifier, where they tends to be more of a second half team. I'm just hoping that that's not going to be the case. I'm hoping they can maybe be like a first half team and maybe score an early goal to settle the nerves, because with the way that this is the youngest team heading into a World Cup by any team that's entering in this World Cup, there's going to be a lot of nerves that is going to come in, and we'll see whether if they can, of course, override those nerves and get a huge victory against Wales. Because I think out of these three teams that they're be facing, I think that Wales might be the team that I might be most confident that they can get all 3 points. And I know that sounds crazy because many people would have thought Iran would be the team that the U.S. might be the most confident, but I'll explain a little bit why that is not the case. Because then the next game that they're going to be facing is against England. So this, of course, is the rematch of the 2010 World Cup. We all remember what happened then that night in South Africa, where the U.S. not only got a 1-1 draw, but that was kind of the Rob Green moment where, thank you, Rob Green, in terms of committing a goalkeeping howler to give the U.S. the equalizer there. But yeah, this game will be on November 25th. Now, England, of course, they qualify for the World Cup after topping Group I of the UEFA qualifier, which is not a surprise because that's kind of how it is for the past couple of World Cup, of them doing well in the qualifier. But now it's all about getting to the stage. And I've already mentioned about England, of the fact that, on theory, they should be one of the best teams in the tournament. And on theory, this should be another team that could be favorites in terms of winning the World Cup. But, a lot has to go right with this team in order for them to once again make a deep run in 2018. And I especially talk about my concern in terms of looking at this England defense. That is definitely a huge question mark. I mean, the attack is kind of what scares me about England. Of course, when you have Harry Kane as the main threat going forward, and even Raheem Sterling or maybe Phil Foden starting in this game. I'm going to be interested to see how our back line is going to deal with them. But offensively, I think they should get chances against England because, like I said, this England back line is a big concern. And especially they mention many times that, if Kyle Walker does not play in this game, and Kyle Walker is really the only guy on that defensive line that you could say that if you're an England fan, you're probably the most trusted to be the guy that put out the fire whenever if the U.S. is going to attack. Yeah, there's definitely that concern on that part. But at least on the U.S. part, there is the good news, the fact that, they will definitely get some opportunity in this game. But it's also going to be interesting to see, coming into this game, just like Wales, England is not in the best of form. In fact, it's been, unlike Wales, where, they're not in the best of form because they have faced some of the best team in the world. You cannot say the same thing about England. I mean, they drew 3-3 against Germany, but then they lost 1-0 to Italy, a team that, yes, Italy did beat England in the Euros 2020 final, but this is an Italy team that didn't qualify for the World Cup. And then they lost 4-0 at home against Hungary, a very surprising and just kind of a very un-England kind of performance of how they would just get absolutely demolished at home, especially against a team that, Hungary is definitely gone much better. And especially, one of the goals that Hungary scored in that game against England was Daniel Gastek from the Philadelphia Union. Again, that was definitely a very big surprising result. And then they drew 0-0 against Italy before drawing 1-1 against Germany. And again, this team, they're winless in the last 5 games, and that it's been a disastrous Nations League group, where I think they also finished, bottom of the Nations League group and got relegated into the B group. And again, this just goes back to what I said about how, England is kind of a team that's similar to the U.S., where, there are definitely some talented players, but it's all about getting it right. And especially from their manager, Gareth Southgate, he's kind of like Greg Berhalter, where he's definitely have his naysayers, and that there's always going to be England fans that's going to be very frustrated with the tactics that Gareth Southgate implements. So it's going to be interesting to see how this game is going to turn out. I mean, I expect maybe this could be a game where the U.S. could sit back a little bit, because I remember last time when both of these teams play against each other, besides the World Cup, which they played each other at Wembley a couple of years ago. Yeah, England absolutely destroyed the U.S. And that, I will say that kind of England squad is definitely much different than this England squad, and you would say maybe a less talented one compared to the last time the U.S. faced against England in that friendly. But there's nevertheless, it's going to be an interesting game, because again, these are two teams that, a lot of people have said that they could be the two teams that could advance through this group, and we'll see how they, of course, will do against each other. And especially, this is now kind of in the middle part part of the group stage game. We'll see how the points are going to be, because I think one of the tricky thing to look at these games is just, the style of how each of these managers might set in the tactics could really depend on where they are in the standings. Because if the U.S. are in a good position, then maybe they won't actually think about. Then, well, actually, I will say that Greg Berhalter might have a difficult decision of maybe should they just go for the kill and get that 6 points, because I think 6 points will be enough for you to qualify, or maybe get a point out of that and hope that on the final day you can get another 3 points to advance into the next round. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to see, especially what happened when we get to it, because this could also be a game where the U.S. could be in a must-win situation in case if they don't get at least a point against Wales in the first group stage. And then finally, in the last game, a game where a lot of people would say that this might be the easiest game, but for me, I don't think so, because yes, Iran is definitely the weakest team if you look at out all three teams, but I think they're kind of a little underrated. And one thing I will say about Iran that maybe people underestimate is the fact that they are probably one, if not the best defensive team in this tournament. And that I have seen before where the U.S., when they do face against defensive team, and I've seen it even in the World Cup qualifying stage, when they face against those teams that tends to be very defensive, the U.S. have a tough time in terms of breaking down. In fact, there's been times where they just get frustrated and they don't know how to break down a low block, and then next thing you know, they get scored on the counter attack or get a sucker punch. So that's kind of what I worry about this game, especially this is kind of a must-win game for the U.S. depending on the situation. And also, not to mention, Iran, of course, finished top of Group A in the final round of Asian qualifier. And when you look at the last 5 results that Iran has, unlike England and Wales, they have been in pretty good form, and they also is a team that don't concede a lot of goals. I mean, they got a 1-0 win against Nicaragua, a 1-1 draw against Senegal, a 1-0 win against Uruguay, a 2-1 loss against Algeria, but in the final game of Asian qualifier, they did get a 2-0 win against Lebanon. Now, some of these teams that they face aren't exactly the strongest team, although I would argue, getting a 1-0 win against Uruguay, a team that some people say that could be a tournament favorite, and then also getting probably the strongest team out of the African region in Senegal. It just shows you that this is a team that they know how to defend. They know how to kind of grind out resort again. I would say that if you give me a comparison in the World Cup qualifier, they kind of similar to what I would say maybe Panama would do. Like, I remember when the U.S. of course played against Panama, especially when it was a road game for them, they really struggled to break down a low block that Panama was putting on the U.S. And that's what I worry about this game when they play Iran, a team that don't concede a lot going, are not going to give you a lot of space to operate, almost kind of operating like a park the bus mode. I mean, I would say that in this game, when they play against Iran, and this might be the case whenever any other team face against Iran in this group stage, if they can get the first goal, then that would definitely relieve the pressure of each of these opponent. And that, again, for the U.S., if they can get a goal against Iran, then I think they have a good shot of winning, because we know that this is an Iran team that, that when it comes to trying to come from behind, they're not really set up to do so. Though you could say that they definitely have some good attacking pieces of their own too. But again, this is a team that is built to be a team that likes to grind out resort. And again, I think that maybe some people underestimate how good Iran could be, and that, again, I think you would say that Iran is going to do the same approach that they did in the last World Cup, because I know in the last World Cup they basically play that same approach where they tend to not play this kind of fantastic soccer, or you would say negative kind of soccer, just kind of park the bus and trying to maybe bunker and hope that you get one opportunity and score one to get a 1-0 result. They're going to do the same thing in this one, and especially the head coach that they're going to get coming into this. It's actually, I think, the same manager that coached the Iran team back in 2018. You better believe he's going to do the same tactics again, and he's going to frustrate the U.S. in this one. And that, I think in this game for the U.S., if they want to get a win against Iran, and in case if they are in a situation where they have to get a win, they can't be frustrated, because if they're frustrated, then that basically play right into Iran's hands, and that could of course be a problem for this team. I mean, in general, let's just hope when we get to this part, it's not going to be a must-win situation for them, because if it is a must-win situation, I do fear that the U.S. could potentially get knocked out of the group stage, because I really don't see how. Like, I know some people will say might be the game that they can get all 3 points. I just don't see it, because of the way that the U.S. has had problems in terms of playing against teams that tends to put a low block and put like 11 mans behind the box, and the U.S. at times had trouble in terms of trying to break them down. But either way, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this preview, and also your prediction of what you see in this preview. I mean, I would say that, I think the U.S. are probably going to get maybe 5 or even 6 points out of this group. I mean, at the best, I would say they could get 7 points. I think they can definitely beat Wales. Against England, it could be a draw, but I wouldn't be surprised if they can get a win. And then against Iran, I would say it could be a draw in this game, especially if the U.S. are already going to be qualifying the next round. I won't be surprised Greg Berhalter maybe play a little bit conservatively in this final game and might not go for it to get all 3 points, but who knows? I mean, again, this is why I said before, it's kind of hard to do a preview and talk about the tactics of how this game is going to be, because it can really change depending on where the U.S. are after playing the first game, or the second game, heading into the final game of the group stage in the World Cup. But either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys hit like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.